I am Travis, 32 years old, and last year I inherited $12 million from my grandfather. The money was meant to be mine alone, but my parents insisted my sister Madison deserved everything as always. They never expected what I did next would leave them completely speechless at our family dinner. The look on their faces when I revealed my decision is something I will never forget. Before I get into my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you. Trust me, what happened next is worth sticking around for. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. Our 5-bedroom colonial house with its manicured 3-acre lawn and heated indoor pool represented the success my father had achieved in corporate law, but it never felt like a warm home to me. From as early as I can remember, there was an unspoken rule in our household. Madison came first. Madison is my sister 2 years younger than me, but somehow always the center of our parents' universe. When we were kids, it showed in countless small ways. Madison got the bigger bedroom with the bay window overlooking the garden. Madison got to choose our vacation destinations. Madison received lavish birthday parties with professional entertainers, while mine were afterthoughts, often celebrated days late because of some conflict with her schedule. Travis, you need to understand your sister is sensitive. My mother would say whenever I questioned the imbalance. She needs more attention. You are so self-sufficient. Self-sufficient. That was their code for we do not need to worry about you. By 10 years old, I had internalized that being low maintenance meant being overlooked. My father, Richard, was a partner at a prestigious law firm in Hartford. He worked 60-hour weeks and expected nothing less than perfection from his children. But perfection was defined differently for each of us. For Madison, earning a B- was celebrated as a tremendous achievement. For me, an A- prompted a lecture about applying myself more diligently. Your sister tries harder than you do, he would explain, despite evidence to the contrary. She puts her whole heart into everything. My mother, Catherine, came from old money and dedicated her life to maintaining our family's social standing. She served on the boards of 3 charities and hosted elaborate fundraisers where Madison was always showcased playing piano or reciting poetry. I was assigned to help the catering staff. The disparity became most apparent during our high school years. Madison was a middling student who cycled through extracurricular activities, monthly quitting, each one after the initial excitement wore off. Yet every abandonment was framed as exploring her passions. When she wrecked her first car, a brand new BMW, 3 weeks after getting her license, my parents immediately replaced it. When I saved for 2 years to buy a used Honda Civic, my father criticized my poor investment decision. The only person who seemed to see me clearly was my grandfather, Bernard. He had built a manufacturing business from nothing, selling it for a small fortune before I was born. Unlike my parents, Grandpa Bernard valued hard work, integrity, and self-reliance. Your parents are making a big mistake with you too, he told me once, during one of our weekend fishing trips. They think they are helping your sister, but they are crippling her, and they underestimate you, which is their greatest oversight. Grandpa Bernard became my mentor. While my parents pushed me toward law school to follow my father's path, my grandfather encouraged my interest in business. We would spend hours discussing entrepreneurship, market trends, and investment strategies. He taught me to read financial statements when I was 15. By 17, I was managing a small investment portfolio he had set up for me. You have good instincts, he would say. Better than your father ever did. When college application time came, my parents had my future mapped out: Yale undergraduate, then Harvard Law. I had different plans. Against their vehement objections, I accepted a scholarship to study business at the University of Pennsylvania. My grandfather was the only one who attended my college graduation. Meanwhile, Madison floundered. She attended 3 different colleges in 5 years, finally obtaining a communications degree from a private university that cost our parents a small fortune. After graduation, she launched a series of failed ventures, a fashion blog that never gained traction, a jewelry line that lost $30,000 in 6 months, and a short-lived career as a social media consultant that consisted mainly of posting selfies from expensive restaurants. Each failure was cushioned by our parents' financial support. She just has not found her calling yet, my mother would defend. Creative souls need time to discover themselves. By 30, I had built a modest but respectable consulting business, helping small companies optimize their operations. I lived within my means in a comfortable but unassuming apartment. I rarely visited my parents' home anymore, tired of the constant comparisons and subtle put-downs. Madison, in contrast, moved back home at 27 after her latest venture, an artisanal soap company, collapsed under the weight of her extravagant spending and minimal effort. I maintained a relationship with my grandfather, visiting him every few weeks at his simple but elegant lakeside home. He had been watching both our paths with interest. "Your sister is $40,000 in credit card debt," he confided during one visit. "Your parents paid it off last year. That is the third time." I was shocked, but not surprised. "They will never let her face consequences." He nodded gravely. "And that is the greatest disservice they could do to her." Little did I know, my grandfather had been taking careful notes on our diverging life paths, and he was forming a plan that would shake our family to its core. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Grandpa Bernard had suffered a massive stroke. By the time I reached the hospital, my parents and Madison were already there, huddled in the waiting area. My father was on his phone handling some work emergency. Madison was scrolling through social media. Only my mother acknowledged my arrival with a brief nod. The doctor was direct, but compassionate. At 84, my grandfather's chances of recovery were minimal. The best we could hope for was a chance to say goodbye. I spent the next 3 days by his bedside, often alone. My parents and Madison made brief appearances between social engagements and work commitments. During his few conscious moments, my grandfather would squeeze my hand and sometimes manage a few words. "Remember. Values," he whispered during one lucid interval. "Not about money. Never was." "I know, Grandpa," I assured him, fighting back tears. "You taught me that." On the third evening, during a rare moment when we were all present, he slipped away peacefully. Madison cried dramatically, collapsing into our mother's arms. My father immediately stepped outside to make calls. I sat silently, holding my grandfather's still warm hand, saying my private goodbyes to the one person who had truly seen me. The funeral was held at the Episcopal Church. My parents attended for social reasons rather than faith. Hundreds came to pay respects to Bernard Miller, the self-made business icon. I listened as people shared stories about his integrity, his generosity, his unwavering ethical standards. My father gave a polished eulogy that somehow made my grandfather's life story sound like an achievement of our entire family rather than the result of his individual grit and determination. 2 weeks after the funeral, we gathered at my grandfather's attorney's office for the reading of the will. I expected a straightforward distribution, perhaps with charitable donations, reflecting my grandfather's lifelong causes. What none of us anticipated was the bombshell that was about to drop. The remainder of my estate, including liquid assets, property holdings, and investment portfolios, with a total approximate value of $12 million, I leave to my grandson Travis Miller, who has demonstrated the values upon which I built my life and fortune. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face reddened. My mother's hand flew to her pearl necklace. Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "There must be some mistake," my father finally said. The attorney, Mr. Goldstein, who had been my grandfather's friend for 40 years, shook his head. "There is no mistake, Richard. Bernard was very specific and of completely sound mind. He revised his will 6 months ago and was absolutely clear about his wishes." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Bernard asked me to give you this privately, but given the circumstances, perhaps it would be best if you read it now." With trembling hands, I opened the letter. "Travis, I have watched you grow into a man of character. You work hard without complaint. You build rather than consume. You face setbacks with resilience. In short, you embody the values that made my own success possible. Your sister has many wonderful qualities, but she has been deeply harmed by indulgence. Your parents, despite their good intentions, have failed to prepare either of you for the realities of life. This inheritance is not a gift, but a responsibility. I trust you to use it wisely, not just for yourself, but for genuine good. Be generous, but not foolish. Help where it truly helps, not where it enables. I am proud of you. Bernard. I looked up to find my mother silently weeping and my father staring at me with naked hostility. Madison had moved from shock to outrage. This is completely unfair, she shouted. I am his granddaughter too. I deserve half of that money. Bernard was clearly manipulated, my father said coldly. We will contest this. Mr. Goldstein cleared his throat. I would strongly advise against that course of action. Bernard anticipated your reaction and prepared extensively to ensure his wishes would be legally ironclad. A contest would be expensive, lengthy, and ultimately futile. The drive home was excruciating. My parents had insisted I accompany them, presumably to begin their campaign to access the inheritance. Madison alternated between tearful pleading and vicious accusations. You always were his favorite, she spat. Did you plan this? Did you turn him against me? Madison, I had no idea, I said truthfully. This is as much a surprise to me as it is to you. Liar. You must have manipulated him when he was sick and vulnerable. My father spoke without taking his eyes off the road. Travis, you know this money should be shared equally. Your grandfather was an old man with outdated ideas. You have a moral obligation to split this inheritance with your sister. Dad, I just learned about this 20 minutes ago. I need time to process everything. There is nothing to process, my mother interjected. Family takes care of family. Madison deserves her fair share. I stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Fair share. Those words echoed in my mind, laden with irony. When had anything in our family been fair? As we pulled into the driveway of my parents' home, my father turned to face me. We expect you to do the right thing here, Travis. Your sister has expenses, plans, dreams. She needs this money to finally establish herself properly. I stepped out of the car feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was validation in my grandfather's choice, a recognition of the values I had tried to live by. But there was also a profound loneliness in standing against my entire family. I will think about everything I said quietly. That is all I can promise right now. Madison slammed her door. What is there to think about? Half is mine. Period. As I drove back to my apartment that night, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from all three of them, alternating between guilt trips, appeals to family loyalty, and thinly veiled threats. The inheritance that should have been a blessing already felt like a curse. The weeks following the will reading were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My family deployed every tactic imaginable to pressure me into giving Madison half of the inheritance. First came the guilt offensive. My mother called daily, her voice thick with performative tears. I just do not understand how you can do this to your sister, she would lament. After everything we have done for you. My father took a more strategic approach, appealing to my sense of practicality. This division is creating unnecessary family conflict, he argued. A simple 50-50 split solves everything. Be reasonable, Travis. Meanwhile, Madison launched a public campaign. To my horror, she began posting thinly veiled references to our situation on her Instagram account, which had a modest following from her various failed business ventures. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife, she wrote, beneath a filtered selfie, showing her looking mournfully into the distance. When those who should protect you become the ones who hurt you most. The comment section filled with sympathetic responses, none of them knowing the actual circumstances. By the third week, extended family members began reaching out. Cousins I had not spoken to in years suddenly called to check in, before inevitably steering the conversation toward the inheritance. Aunts and uncles sent emails expressing concern about the family rift, while clearly siding with Madison. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, was particularly direct. Your mother is absolutely devastated, she informed me during an unexpected phone call. She raised you better than this, Travis. Your poor sister was counting on that money to finally get her life on track. Did Mom put you up to this call? I asked. The telling pause before her denial confirmed my suspicion. The pressure campaign escalated when my parents began showing up at my workplace. My father arrived unannounced at my office one afternoon, nodding politely to my startled colleagues before cornering me in the conference room. This has gone on long enough, he said, his voice low, but intense. Your stubbornness is destroying this family. Your mother can barely sleep. Is that what you want? Dad, this was Grandpa's decision, not mine. He had his reasons. Your grandfather was a stubborn old man with outdated notions. He did not understand Madison's creative spirit. She needs more runway to find her path. I looked at my father, suddenly seeing clearly how his perspective had been warped by years of making excuses for my sister. She is 30 years old, Dad. How much runway does she need? His expression hardened. You have always been jealous of the special attention she required. Now you are punishing her out of spite. The conversation ended with his ultimatum: share the inheritance equally, or be prepared for permanent estrangement from the family. Just when I thought things could not intensify further, Madison showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning. She looked uncharacteristically disheveled, her eyes red, rimmed, and puffy. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into my living room. Just us siblings, no parents. For a brief moment, I hoped for a genuine conversation, perhaps even a breakthrough in our relationship. That hope evaporated when she collapsed onto my couch and burst into frantic tears. You have to help me, Travis. I am in serious trouble. Over the next hour, the truth spilled out. Madison had a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control over the past 3 years. What had started as recreational poker nights had escalated to online gambling sites and weekend trips to Atlantic City. She was over $2 million in debt to creditors, who were becoming increasingly insistent about repayment. Mom and Dad covered it up until now, she admitted. They paid off the smaller debts, but this is too big even for them. They are tapped out, Travis. I need the inheritance or these people. They are not nice people. They have threatened me. I was stunned. $2 million. How is that even possible? It just happened. I kept trying to win it back and things got worse. Her eyes took on a calculating look through the tears. But now you can fix everything. You have $12 million. The realization hit me this wasn't about fair shares or family loyalty. This was about covering up a catastrophic series of poor decisions. My parents weren't fighting for Madison's rights. They were desperate to solve a problem they had helped create through years of enablement. My suspicions prompted me to do something I never thought I would need to do: investigate my own family's finances. I hired a discreet financial investigator who specialized in family wealth matters. What he uncovered was shocking. My parents, despite their appearance of affluence, were financially overextended. Their mansion carried 2 mortgages. My father's partnership stake in his law firm had been leveraged as collateral for personal loans. They had withdrawn most of their retirement savings over the past 5 years, coinciding with Madison's escalating gambling addiction. Most disturbing of all, they had approached my grandfather multiple times in the year before his death, seeking substantial loans. According to records, my investigator found he had refused each time, likely recognizing that the money would go toward enabling Madison rather than actually helping her. The complete picture was now painfully clear. My inheritance wasn't just about my grandfather recognizing my values. It was his last attempt to break a destructive family pattern, one that was consuming everyone involved. I consulted both a financial advisor and a therapist during this period, trying to navigate the complex emotional and practical landscape. The financial advisor helped me understand the responsibility of suddenly managing such wealth. The therapist helped me process the lifetime of family dynamics that had led to this breaking point. You are not responsible for solving problems. Others created, my therapist reminded me during a particularly difficult session, even when those others are family, especially when enabling would only continue destructive patterns. As the pressure from my family intensified, I found myself at a crossroads. The easiest path would be to give in, split the money, and try to salvage some semblance of family peace. But in my heart, I knew that would betray my grandfather's intentions and ultimately harm everyone involved, including Madison. What began as a simple inheritance dispute had revealed much deeper fractures in our family system, and I was beginning to realize that any resolution would require more courage and creativity than a simple division of assets. 6 weeks after the will reading, my parents called a family meeting at their house. The formal invitation, delivered by email rather than their usual texts, signaled the seriousness of the occasion. I arrived to find them seated in the living room, Madison, beside them on the antique sofa, that had always been off-limits to us as children. The unified front was unmistakable, 3 against 1. My father got straight to the point. "We have been patient, Travis, but this situation requires resolution. We have a simple choice for you. Share the inheritance equally with your sister, or consider yourself no longer part of this family." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Despite anticipating this ultimatum, hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a physical blow. "You would disown me over money?" I asked quietly. "This is not about money," my mother insisted, though her nervous adjustment of her expensive bracelet suggested otherwise. "This is about loyalty and fairness." "I have a counter-proposal," I said, having prepared for this moment. "I will pay off Madison's gambling debts. $2 million directly to her creditors, not to her." Madison's face flushed. "That is not enough. I deserve half." "You do not deserve anything," I replied, maintaining a calm tone despite my racing heart. This was Grandpa's money to distribute as he saw fit. He chose me as the steward of his legacy. "I am offering to solve your immediate problem out of compassion, not obligation." My father leaned forward, his attorney persona taking over. $2 million is a start, but hardly equitable. We are talking about $6 million as Madison's rightful share. Her rightful share? According to whom? Not according to the legal owner of the money who created the will. My mother's voice turned cold. "I did not raise you to be this selfish, Travis." Something in me snapped at her words. "No. You raised me to accept less than Madison in every situation. You raised me to believe my needs were secondary. You raised me to enable her poor choices by sacrificing my own interests. Not this time." I stood up, surprising even myself with my resolve. "The offer stands, $2 million to clear her debts, paid directly to creditors. Nothing more." Madison burst into tears. Her go-to strategy whenever confrontation didn't go her way. "You have always hated me. You are enjoying this." "I don't hate you, Madison, but I won't enable you anymore. Neither should our parents." My father stood as well, his face contorted with anger. "Get out of this house. You are no son of mine until you rectify this situation properly." I walked to the door, then turned back. "I will give you 48 hours to consider my offer. After that, it is withdrawn completely." The drive home was a blur of emotions. Had I just lost my family forever? Was I being cruel or principled? The line between the two felt impossibly thin. At home, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, my grandfather's preferred drink, and sat at my desk. As I absently opened the drawer looking for a coaster, I noticed a small key I had forgotten about. It belonged to a safe deposit box my grandfather had instructed me to access after his death. In the chaos of the inheritance situation, I had completely forgotten about it. The next morning I visited the bank. The safe deposit box contained a leather-bound journal, a USB drive, and a handwritten note addressed to me. "Travis, if you are reading this, then my suspicions were correct, and my will has created the family conflict I anticipated. This journal contains my private thoughts over the past 5 years. The drive contains documentation you may find illuminating. Use them wisely, but remember that truth without compassion can be another form of cruelty. Bernard." Over the next several hours in my apartment, I discovered the full extent of what my grandfather had observed and documented. The journal detailed his growing concern about Madison's gambling addiction and my parents' enabling behavior. It recorded their increasingly desperate requests for money and his strategic refusals. Most shockingly, it revealed that Madison had visited him 3 days before his stroke, demanding he change his will to leave everything to her. According to his account, she had become belligerent when he refused, accusing him of never loving her and threatening to cut him off from the family entirely. The USB drive contained recorded conversations, financial records, and email exchanges that corroborated everything in the journal. My grandfather, ever the meticulous businessman, had created a comprehensive record of the family dysfunction he observed, but felt powerless to correct directly. This discovery was the breaking point. Any lingering doubt or guilt I felt about honoring my grandfather's wishes evaporated. He hadn't made his decision lightly, or without full awareness of the consequences. He had been trying in his final act to break a destructive cycle. I spent the next week in near isolation, ignoring the barrage of calls and messages from my family as their 48-hour deadline passed. Instead, I retreated to my grandfather's lakeside cabin, a modest property not included in the formal estate, because he had transferred ownership to me years earlier. Surrounded by his books, and sitting in his old leather chair overlooking the water, I found the clarity I needed. This inheritance was not just money to be distributed, it was a responsibility to be honored. My grandfather had entrusted me with his legacy, because he believed in my judgment. Now, I needed to prove that trust warranted. During those quiet days at the cabin, I formulated a plan that went beyond the simple yes or no decision my family had tried to force. I would neither give in to their demands nor cut them off entirely. Instead, I would create a third path, one that might actually address the real issues rather than merely treating symptoms. When I returned to the city, I was a changed man. The constant anxiety that had plagued me since the will reading had been replaced by a steady resolve. I was no longer reacting to my family's pressure. I was acting according to my own principles. I sent a brief message to my parents. I have made my decision regarding the inheritance. I would like to discuss it with the entire family over dinner next Friday at 7 p.m. I will make reservations at La Maison. My father's terse reply came hours later. We expect you have made the right choice. Little did they know my definition of right had fundamentally changed. With a clear vision in mind, I assembled a team of professionals to help implement my plan. My first call was to Eleanor James, a financial advisor, specializing in family wealth management and inheritance disputes. Her reputation for balancing financial prudence with family dynamics made her perfect for my situation. You are in a unique position, Eleanor observed during our first meeting. Most clients in inheritance conflicts are either fully adversarial or completely conciliatory. You are trying to chart a middle path. I want to be fair without being foolish, I explained. Generous without enabling dysfunction. Next, I engaged Martin Cohen, an attorney with expertise in trust structures and family governance. Together with Eleanor, we began constructing a comprehensive approach to the inheritance that would honor my grandfather's intentions while addressing legitimate family needs. We can create structures that provide support without relinquishing appropriate control, Martin explained as we reviewed documents. The key is to distinguish between support and enablement. While my professional team handled the technical aspects, I focused on understanding the deeper family dynamics at play. I reached out to my Uncle James, my father's younger brother, who had been estranged from our family for nearly a decade. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe, away from familiar neighborhoods. I am not surprised Bernard left everything to you, James said. After hearing my situation, he and I discussed it last year. You knew about his plans. I was shocked. James nodded. Your grandfather was concerned about the pattern he saw developing. Richard and Catherine enabling Madison at everyone's expense, including hers. He stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Did you know your father had a similar dynamic with his own parents? They bailed him out of financial trouble repeatedly in his 20s. This revelation added a new dimension to my understanding. The pattern hadn't started with my parents and Madison, it was intergenerational. My father was repeating with Madison what his parents had done with him. Bernard broke that cycle in his own life, James continued. He refused bailouts as a young man, built everything through disciplined work. He hoped Richard would develop the same self-reliance, but when that did not happen, he became determined that the pattern would stop with you. Armed with this deeper understanding, I continued developing my plan. I divided the inheritance into several strategic components. First, I established a legitimate family foundation with $5 million dedicated to causes my grandfather had championed: educational opportunities for first-generation college students, entrepreneurship programs in underserved communities, and veteran support services. The foundation structure included family governance provisions, requiring all family members to participate responsibly to maintain their board positions. Second, I created a structured debt repayment program for Madison, designed not just to clear her immediate gambling debts, but to provide professional addiction counseling and financial rehabilitation. The program would pay creditors directly and release additional funds only upon meeting specific recovery milestones. Third, I investigated my parents' financial situation more thoroughly. Working with financial specialists who could maintain appropriate confidentiality, I discovered that my father's law firm was struggling more than he had admitted. Several major clients had departed, and the partnership was facing a potential dissolution. My parents' seemingly luxurious lifestyle was increasingly financed by debt, creating a precarious situation they were desperate to hide. Fourth, I allocated a portion of the inheritance to creating educational trusts for future generations, including any children Madison might have. These trusts specifically covered educational expenses and basic needs with governance structures, preventing misuse. Finally, I invested a significant portion in promising startups and social enterprises, creating a portfolio that aligned with my grandfather's values of building real businesses that solved real problems. I was determined that his money would continue generating positive impact rather than merely financing consumption. Throughout this process, I maintained minimal contact with my immediate family. Their messages oscillated between anger, emotional manipulation, and occasional conciliatory overtures, all clearly aimed at securing the outcome they wanted. I responded politely but briefly, focusing my energy on preparations rather than ongoing conflict. A surprising development came 3 days before our scheduled dinner. While reviewing my grandfather's financial records, I discovered documentation of a business venture my father had attempted 15 years earlier. He had apparently borrowed heavily to invest in a real estate development that ultimately failed. My grandfather had privately covered the losses to prevent family embarrassment, but had documented everything meticulously. This explains so much about my father's bitterness toward his own father despite the financial rescue. Being saved from his poor decision had preserved his reputation, but wounded his pride. Now he was projecting that same dynamic onto my relationship with Madison. As the day of our dinner meeting approached, I spent time practicing emotional control techniques my therapist had recommended. I anticipated intense reactions to my plan, and wanted to remain centered regardless of how my family responded. Remember that their reactions reflect their issues, not the validity of your decisions, my therapist had advised. You cannot control how they respond, only how you present your truth. I made reservations at La Maison, an upscale French restaurant that had been the site of family celebrations throughout my childhood. The familiar setting would provide a sense of continuity, while the public location would hopefully moderate extreme reactions. The evening before the dinner, I reviewed everything one final time with my advisors, ensuring all documents were properly prepared and all arrangements finalized. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was ready. My grandfather had trusted me with his legacy, and I was determined to honor that trust with wisdom and integrity. Your plan shows remarkable maturity, Eleanor commented, as we concluded our final review. Many people would either cave to family pressure or cut ties completely. Creating this third path requires real courage. I thought about my grandfather's journal entry from just weeks before his death. True generosity is not giving people what they want, but what they truly need. Sometimes, these are vastly different things. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow would change our family forever one way or another. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I was acting rather than reacting. I was standing firmly in my own values rather than being buffeted by others' demands. Whatever happened at tomorrow's dinner, I would face it with the quiet strength my grandfather had always seen in me, even when no one else did. La Maison exuded old-world elegance with its crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and discreet attentive service. I arrived 30 minutes early to ensure everything was perfectly arranged. The private dining room I had reserved was set with 4 places at a round table, intimate enough for conversation, but formal enough to maintain boundaries. I had instructed the staff about the timing of courses, and requested minimal interruptions once the meal began. The maitre d' assured me everything would proceed according to plan. A bottle of my father's preferred Bordeaux was already breathing on the sideboard. The 3 envelopes containing my decisions were tucked inside my suit jacket. At precisely 6:55, my mother arrived, first always punctual to a fault. She wore a navy blue dress with her signature pearl necklace, her posture rigid with tension despite her attempt at a neutral expression. "Travis," she said, offering her cheek for the obligatory kiss, "I trust we can resolve this unfortunate situation tonight." "We will certainly bring it to a conclusion," I replied, holding her chair. My father entered next, scanning the room with the assessing gaze of someone accustomed to controlling every environment he entered. His bespoke suit and commanding presence had intimidated me throughout my childhood, but tonight I saw him differently, noticing the new lines of stress around his eyes and the slightly desperate quality behind his confident facade. "Son," he said with a curt nod, not extending his hand. Madison arrived last 10 minutes late, as was her custom. She had clearly put considerable effort into her appearance, wearing an expensive dress I recognized from social media posts of her most recent shopping spree, likely financed by my parents. Her expression cycled rapidly between practiced charm and barely concealed anxiety. "Travis, this place is so formal," she said with a nervous laugh. "Are we celebrating?" "In a way," I answered mildly. I thought a significant family decision deserved an appropriate setting. Once we were all seated and had placed our orders, an uncomfortable silence descended. My father broke it with his usual directness. "I assume you have called us here to announce your decision to do the right thing," he said, reaching for his wine glass. "While the delay was unnecessary, we can put this unpleasantness behind us once the proper arrangements are made." "I have indeed made arrangements," I replied, "though perhaps not the ones you are expecting." My mother's smile tightened. "Travis, we have been very patient. This family crisis has gone on long enough." Madison nodded eagerly. "I already have plans for updating my wardrobe and putting a down payment on a condo in Tribeca. My friend Jasmine knows a realtor who can show us properties immediately." I took a slow sip of water, centering myself before responding. "Before we discuss any arrangements, I think we need to establish some facts." From my jacket, I removed the first envelope and placed it on the table. This contains copies of documentation I discovered after Grandpa's death. It includes his private journal entries, detailing Madison's gambling addiction, the $2 million in debt she has accumulated, and the multiple times you, Mom, and Dad have financially bailed her out at the expense of your own financial stability. The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Madison looked like she might be ill. "That is private family business," my father said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It became my business when you demanded I give Madison $6 million without disclosing the real reasons you wanted it," I countered. The envelope also contains details of Madison's visit to Grandpa 3 days before his stroke, where she demanded he change his will in her favor, and became belligerent when he refused. Madison's eyes widened in shock. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Grandpa recorded the conversation." "He recorded quite a lot, actually." The first course arrived, but no one moved to touch their food. The silence was heavy with tension and unspoken recriminations. "Travis, whatever you think you know," my mother began. I raised my hand gently. "I do not bring these things up to shame anyone. I mention them because we cannot move forward honestly without acknowledging the reality of our situation." I placed the second envelope on the table. This contains the documentation for a structured trust I have established to address Madison's gambling debts and provide for her legitimate needs not wants going forward. Madison reached for the envelope, but I kept my hand on it. "The trust will pay your creditors directly. Madison, $2 million to clear your current debts. It also provides for comprehensive addiction treatment at a facility specializing in gambling disorders. Upon successful completion of the program, the trust will provide a modest monthly income contingent upon continued therapy and regular financial counseling." "You cannot dictate terms to me like I am a child," Madison protested, though her voice lacked conviction. "I am not dictating. I am offering help that actually helps, rather than enables. You can accept these terms or decline them entirely. That is your choice as an adult." I turned to my parents, whose shock was giving way to calculation as they processed what I was saying. My father's legal mind was clearly already looking for angles and loopholes. The third envelope, I continued, placing it before them, contains documentation showing that I have paid off the second mortgage on your home and established a structured financial planning program to help you reorganize your affairs. I am aware that Dad's law firm is struggling, and that you have been maintaining appearances at the cost of financial stability. My father's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You investigated us, your own parents." I protected myself by understanding the full situation before making irrevocable financial decisions. I corrected, just as Grandpa would have advised. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wine. So you are giving Madison only 2 million of the 12. That is hardly fair. Fairness is not simply dividing money equally, I replied. Fairness is responding appropriately to each person's actual situation. Madison needs addiction treatment and financial boundaries more than she needs millions in unrestricted funds. You and Dad need financial stability and retirement planning more than you need to maintain appearances. I took a breath before delivering the final part of my plan. I have also established a family foundation with $5 million of the inheritance. All 4 of us will serve on the board provided we meet basic requirements of responsible participation. The foundation will support causes Grandpa believed in and can become a positive legacy for our entire family. The main course arrived, the timing impeccable. The waiter served each plate with professional flourish, seemingly oblivious to the emotional tension crackling around the table. No one touched their food. This is completely unacceptable. My father finally said, his voice low but intense. You have overstepped every boundary. We are your parents, not projects for you to manage. And I am your son, not your bailout plan, I replied evenly. I am offering genuine help based on the actual circumstances, not the fiction we have all been maintaining. Madison, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke. Did Grandpa really record our conversation? Her voice was small, lacking its usual dramatic flair. I nodded. Every word. So he knew how desperate I was, how scared. Tears filled her eyes, but for once they seemed genuine rather than tactical. Those men I owe money to, they have been threatening me for months. I just wanted it to stop. And it will stop, I assured her. The trust will clear those debts immediately, regardless of whether you accept the rest of the conditions. For the first time in our adult lives, I saw a flicker of genuine gratitude in my sister's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. My mother looked between us, her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. All these years, we have only wanted what was best for both of you. I believe you wanted that, I acknowledged. But wanting the best for someone and providing what they actually need are different things. Grandpa understood that distinction. My father had not touched his food or wine. He sat rigidly, his attorney mask firmly in place. And if we reject these presumptuous arrangements of yours? That is your right, I said simply. The offers have acceptance deadlines clearly outlined in the documents. After those dates, they expire permanently. Your choices are entirely your own, just as mine was. The remainder of the dinner passed in a strange limbo. We made sporadic attempts at normal conversation, commenting on the food or neutral topics, while the weight of everything revealed hung in the air between us. My parents maintained their composure through years of social training, but the shock was evident in their eyes and stiff movements. As dessert was served, my father finally addressed the heart of the matter. You have obviously given this considerable thought. While I cannot say I approve of your methods or conclusions, I acknowledge the effort behind them. Coming from him, this grudging statement was as close to acceptance as I could expect tonight. Madison seemed lost in her own thoughts, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, a mixture of resentment, relief, and something that might have been respect. My mother maintained her social veneer until the very end, complimenting the meal and making a show of normalcy for the staff. But as we prepared to leave, she pulled me aside briefly. You are more like your grandfather than I ever realized, she said quietly. For better or worse. We parted in the restaurant lobby with formal goodbyes, and no mention of when we might speak again. As I watched them walk to their respective cars, I felt neither triumph nor regret, only a quiet certainty that I had done what was right, even if it had been difficult. Whatever happened next would depend on choices they would make independently. For the first time in our family's history, I had refused to participate in our dysfunctional patterns, offering instead a different path forward. Whether they would take it remained to be seen. The weeks following our dinner at La Maison passed in relative silence. I had anticipated immediate pushback, perhaps even legal challenges to my proposed arrangements, but instead encountered a strange quiet. It was as if the family system, so accustomed to its dysfunctional patterns, did not quite know how to respond when those patterns were disrupted. The first concrete development came 3 weeks after our dinner. My phone rang on a Sunday afternoon displaying Madison's number. I answered with some trepidation. "Travis," she said, her voice lacking its usual dramatic flair. "I have been thinking about everything. About what you said. About the trust." "Yes," I prompted when she fell silent. "I have called the treatment center you recommended. I have an intake appointment tomorrow morning." She paused. "I am scared." The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. Throughout our lives, Madison had maintained a carefully constructed facade of confident entitlement. This glimpse of genuine fear and uncertainty was entirely new. "It is okay to be scared," I told her. "But you are doing the right thing. The brave thing. Will you? Would you come with me? Just for the intake. I do not think I can do it alone." The request stunned me. Madison had never voluntarily included me in any significant aspect of her life before. "Of course. Text me the details, and I will be there." The treatment facility was a discreet professional establishment, nestled in a converted historic mansion outside the city. Madison was uncharacteristically subdued, as we sat in the waiting room, her usual designer outfit replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. "I have been gambling since college," she said, suddenly staring at her hands. "It started as poker nights with friends, then casinos during spring break, then online, where I could do it anytime, day or night." She looked up at me. "Did you know you can lose $10,000 in under an hour on your phone? It is terrifyingly easy." I did not know that I said quietly. "Mom and Dad always fixed everything. Every mess I made, I never had to face consequences." Her voice cracked slightly. "I think maybe that was the problem all along." When the intake counselor called her name Madison, squeezed my hand briefly before standing. "Thank you for coming. And for not just giving me the money. I think Grandpa was right about you." That moment marked the beginning of a slow, tentative reconstruction of our relationship. It was far from a fairy tale transformation, but it was the first authentic connection we had shared as adults. My parents took longer to come around. The trust documentation for their mortgage payoff sat unsigned for nearly 2 months. My father's pride made it difficult for him to accept help, especially from his son, and especially after the public revelation of his financial difficulties. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My Uncle James, having reconnected with me during my information gathering phase, reached out to my father for the first time in years. "Your brother told me about their conversation," my mother revealed during a cautious coffee meeting 6 weeks after our dinner. "James said some things about your grandfather that Richard needed to hear. About patterns repeating through generations." "Is Dad okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She sighed, looking suddenly older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen her. "He is struggling with many things. His firm is likely to dissolve by year-end. His identity has been so wrapped up in being the successful provider, the one who fixes everything." She traced the rim of her coffee cup. "In many ways, he is facing what Madison is facing, just in a different form." 2 days later, the signed trust documents arrived by courier, with a brief note in my father's precise handwriting. "We accept your terms. Thank you for the consideration behind them." It was not an apology or a warm reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, a beginning. The family foundation became an unexpected catalyst for healing. Our first board meeting 3 months after the dinner was awkward but productive. We each presented causes we felt deserved support, and for perhaps the first time, really listened to each other's values and priorities. Madison, still in outpatient treatment, following her initial intensive program, suggested supporting gambling addiction education for college students. My father proposed legal aid for veterans. My mother advocated for arts education in underserved schools. I presented a microfinance initiative for first-generation entrepreneurs. We funded all 4, allocating resources through a process that required consensus rather than competition. The work gave us a shared purpose beyond our personal grievances and a structured way to rebuild relationships based on collaboration rather than the old hierarchies. My personal life transformed as well. Freed from the constant anxiety of family approval, I expanded my consulting business in directions that truly excited me. I developed a specialty in helping family-owned businesses navigate succession planning, drawing on my own experiences to help others avoid similar pitfalls. I also began dating seriously for the first time in years. My previous relationships had always been hampered by my reluctance to introduce romantic partners to my family dynamics. With clearer boundaries established, I found myself more open to connection. Rachel, a marine biologist I met through a foundation grantee, brought a refreshing perspective entirely outside my family's world of corporate law and social positioning. Her passion for her work and straightforward communication style reminded me in some ways of my grandfather. "You talk about him like he is still guiding you," she observed one evening, as we walked along the lake near my grandfather's cabin, now my weekend retreat. "It is like he gave you more than money. He gave you permission to be yourself." Her insight struck me profoundly. That was exactly what my grandfather had done, not just through his will, but throughout my life. While my parents had always tried to mold me into their vision, he had consistently encouraged me to develop my own. One year, after our revelatory dinner at La Maison, we gathered again as a family, this time at my grandfather's lakeside cabin. The location was deliberate, a neutral space, with positive associations for all of us. Madison arrived first 9 months sober and noticeably changed. She had found work at a marketing firm, a job secured through her own efforts rather than family connections. The structured life of regular employment, ongoing therapy, and financial boundaries seemed to have given her a stability she had never previously known. "I still get the urge sometimes," she admitted, as we set up chairs on the deck overlooking the water. "But I have tools now, and honestly, having limits helps." I never thought I would say that. My parents arrived together but changed in subtle ways. My father had left his struggling firm and opened a much smaller practice, focusing on veteran affairs inspired partly by our foundation work. My mother had scaled back her social commitments to focus on causes she genuinely cared about rather than those that conferred status. "The cabin looks good," my father commented, running his hand along the refurbished porch railing. "Bernard would approve." "Thanks," I said. "I have been fixing it up weekends. Grandpa taught me the basics, but I have been learning as I go." "You always were good with your hands," he replied. "I should have encouraged that more." The simple acknowledgement so long withheld meant more than any grand gesture could have. Our dinner was not without tension. Years of established patterns do not disappear overnight. Old communication habits occasionally resurfaced, quickly followed by awkward pauses as we caught ourselves. But there was also genuine laughter, honest conversation, and moments of connection that would have been impossible a year earlier. As we finished dessert, my mother raised her glass. "To Bernard," she said, "who is still teaching us even now." We all drank to that, united in a way that honored both our individual journeys and our shared history. Later, as I stood alone on the dock watching moonlight shimmer across the lake, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The inheritance that had initially seemed like a burden had become a catalyst for necessary change. My grandfather had known that money alone solves nothing, but money guided by principles can create opportunities for growth and healing. I had learned to stand firm in my values while remaining open to compassion. I had discovered the difference between helping and enabling. Most importantly, I had found that family bonds can be reconstructed on healthier foundations when outdated patterns are finally broken. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that upset your family, but that you knew was right? Did you stand your ground or give in to keep the peace? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is set boundaries that promote growth rather than dependency. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you wisdom and courage in navigating your own family relationships.